Imagine that one day you wake up and discover that everything you have feared in your life was never real. I'm not talking about a magic trick. It's not a mind game, and it's not an empty promise of cheap optimism. I'm talking about a truth so powerful that when you discover it, you won't be able to see life the same way again. Think about this. How many times have you felt fear, anxiety, sadness, or frustration over something that in the end wasn't as serious as you imagined? How many sleepless nights have you spent, anguished over a problem that seemed insignificant the next day? How many times has your mind made you suffer over things that never came to happen? Maybe sometimes you thought you were going to fail at something, and when the moment came, you realized that you handled it better than you thought. Or perhaps you felt afraid of speaking in public, imagining that everyone would judge you, only to discover that no one was paying as much attention to you as you thought. Fear, anguish, anxiety seem real, but in most cases, they are a construction of your mind. And the worst part is that they govern us, paralyze us, make us make wrong decisions, and prevent us from living with freedom. Now imagine something more radical. What if I told you that suffering doesn't come from reality itself, but from how you interpret that reality? That fear, pain, and stress are nothing more than illusions created by your mind? Think about the stress you feel when you believe someone is speaking badly about you. For hours or days, your mind fills with assumptions, images, and internal dialogues. But how many times has it turned out to be true? And what if that person wasn't even thinking about you? Your suffering existed without reason. The problem is that our mind acts as if our worst nightmares were real. It terrifies us with images of failure, rejection, or loss, and we react as if these images were the present. We get tangled in a spiral of anguish that has no foundation. But what if I told you there is a way to break this cycle? That there exists a method proven by philosophy to see reality with clarity and stop being slaves to our fears? This idea isn't new. In fact, it's so powerful that it transformed the history of philosophy and was discovered by a man who lost everything for daring to think differently. A man who was rejected, betrayed, condemned to isolation, but instead of giving up, found in his solitude a key to freeing himself from suffering. Today, I'm going to reveal Spinoza's formula for ending fear and pain. But first, I warn you of something. Once you understand it, your way of seeing the world will change forever. The man who was erased from history. To understand Spinoza's formula, you must first know the story of its creator. Baruch Spinoza was born in 1632 in Amsterdam, within a very strict Sephardic Jewish community. His parents were merchants who had fled the Inquisition in Spain and Portugal, seeking a place where they could live in peace. From childhood, Spinoza showed exceptional intelligence. He stood out for his ability to analyze ideas deeply and logically. While other children accepted sacred texts without questioning, he had questions that disturbed his teachers and his community. What is God really? Why does suffering exist? What does it mean to be free? In his environment, these were not acceptable questions. The Jewish community of Amsterdam had a tense relationship with the Christian world that surrounded them. To survive, they had to maintain a delicate balance, not draw too much attention, not challenge established beliefs. But Spinoza couldn't help it. From a young age, he began to study philosophers like Aristotle, Averroes, and Maimonides. He immersed himself in science and logic, and soon came to a dangerous conclusion. Traditional religion didn't have all the answers. God wasn't a human being with emotions and desires. He didn't reward or punish, didn't intervene in the world. For Spinoza, God was the universe itself, the laws that govern it, the necessary order of nature. But saying this in his community was social suicide. The day they erased him from history. At 23 years old, his community took a drastic decision. Spinoza was called before the rabbinical tribunal and given an opportunity to retract, but he refused. Then they excommunicated him. The exact words of the sentence were devastating. May he be cursed by day and cursed by night. May his death not be mourned, and may his memory disappear from the earth. From that moment on, Spinoza ceased to exist for his community. No one could speak with him. No one could offer him help. No one could even mention his name. His family rejected him. His friends abandoned him. His neighbors pretended he had never existed. It was worse than death. For many, this punishment would have meant the end. They would have sunk into despair, into sadness, into resentment. But Spinoza did something incredible. Instead of lamenting, he took his greatest disgrace and turned it into his greatest strength. A man alone against the world. Spinoza moved away from the community and began a new life. He survived as a lens polisher, a job that allowed him to earn just enough to live. But while he worked, he dedicated every free minute to writing and thinking. Living in poverty and isolation, he built a philosophical system that would change the world. He affirmed that freedom didn't consist of choosing between different options, but in understanding reality as it is. And with this idea, Spinoza discovered something amazing. His vision of the world was completely different from what was believed in his time. While most saw life as a struggle between good and evil, he saw a universe where everything happens by necessity, without punishments or rewards. He didn't believe in destiny as something mystical, but as a logical consequence of the laws of nature. Each action, each thought, each emotion was determined by an infinite chain of causes and effects. This meant that people weren't free in the traditional sense. They didn't choose their desires, their fears, or their emotions. They were the result of everything that had happened before. But paradoxically, this idea didn't lead to pessimism, but to liberation. The universe follows an order and you are not free. This is where Spinoza's philosophy becomes truly impactful. For centuries, humanity has believed in the idea of free will, the belief that we are masters of our decisions, that we can shape our destiny with every choice we make. But what if I told you this is an illusion? Spinoza came to a conclusion that in his time was considered heretical. Even today, it remains a disturbing idea. He claimed that everything in the universe follows a logical and necessary order. Nothing happens by chance. Nothing escapes the laws of nature. And this includes your thoughts, your emotions, and your decisions. When we look at the world, we see patterns. The sun rises and sets each day with mathematical precision. The seasons change, rivers flow, planets orbit around the sun. Everything obeys immutable natural laws. Why would it be different with human beings? If everything in nature follows an order, our minds and emotions must do so as well. And this means something disturbing. What we call free will is just an illusion. Your life is the result of causes and effects. Stop for a moment and think about this. Did you choose to be afraid? Did you choose what things cause you suffering? Did you choose to be who you are? Or did it simply happen? From the moment you were born, there were a series of factors that determined how you would be. You didn't choose the family you were born into. You didn't choose your genetics, your personality, or your emotional tendencies. You didn't choose the events that shaped you when you were a child. Every experience you lived through, every external influence, every small interaction formed the person you are today. Your mind, your thoughts, and your emotions have been programmed by everything you've experienced. If you grew up in an environment where failure was punished, you're likely afraid of making mistakes today. If you were rejected in your childhood, you probably feel anxiety when trying to connect with other people. None of this was a conscious decision. It's as if you were a ship in the ocean believing you decide where to go, when in reality, the currents and winds take you where the universe dictates. The illusion of control. This idea can be unsettling. If everything is determined, if there is no free will, what's the point of life? Why struggle? Why make an effort? Why try to change? But here comes the revolutionary aspect of Spinoza. He claimed that the key to happiness isn't in controlling the world, but in understanding it. If you understand that everything happens by necessity, you stop blaming yourself for what you cannot change. If you accept that the universe follows an order, you stop resisting the inevitable. When you understand the causes that lead you to act in certain ways, you can transcend them. Understanding reality allows you to live with greater clarity. True power isn't in changing what you cannot control, but in changing the way you interpret it. Understanding that everything is determined doesn't mean resigning yourself, but seeing more clearly how life works. Accepting this doesn't mean you shouldn't make decisions or fight for what you want. It means you can do it without anguish, without attachment, and without fear. If everything is determined, then fear and suffering are an illusion. Here comes the most important part. If everything in the universe follows an order, if each thought, emotion, and decision is part of a chain of causes and effects, then fear, suffering, and stress are just automatic reactions. Your brain doesn't experience reality directly. It doesn't see the world as it is, but interprets it through filters of memory, experience, and biology. What you feel at this moment is the result of a series of processes that have occurred in your mind, many of them without you realizing it. Expectations versus reality. The majority of human suffering doesn't come from reality itself, but from the difference between what we expected and what actually happened. Imagine you work hard to get a promotion at your job. You put in effort for months, convinced that your work will be rewarded. But one day, the company chooses someone else. Your immediate reaction is anger, frustration, sadness. You feel that life is unfair, that you're not valued, that all your effort was in vain. But what if you changed the perspective? What if instead of seeing this as a tragedy, you saw it as an opportunity? Maybe that promotion would have led you to a position where you wouldn't be happy. Maybe it was a sign to look for a better job. Suffering arises when we cling to an idea of how things should be, instead of accepting how they really are. Spinoza explained it with one of his most famous phrases: "We should not weep or laugh, but understand." When we understand why something happens, the suffering diminishes. When we accept that reality doesn't adapt to our desires, but follows its own laws, we learn to flow with it. The power of understanding suffering. This is Spinoza's most impactful discovery. If you understand the nature of your suffering, suffering loses power over you. If you understand the cause of your fear, fear stops dominating you. If you stop resisting reality, you find peace. Life is like a river. You can fight against the current, curse the water, try to swim in the opposite direction, or you can learn to move with it, to use its force to your advantage, to stop fighting against the inevitable. Suffering doesn't disappear because the world changes. Suffering disappears when you change the way you interpret it. And when you understand this, there's no turning back. How to apply Spinoza's formula in your life. Now that you know the theory, you're probably wondering how to apply this in your daily life. Because understanding an idea isn't enough. Real change happens when you put it into practice. Here are 3 concrete steps to start freeing yourself from fear and suffering from today. Observe your emotions without judging them. Fear, anger, sadness. They're not your enemies. They're signals. Your mind isn't working against you. It's just sending you information. Imagine someone ignores you in a conversation. Your first reaction might be, "I don't matter, they're dismissing me, this always happens to me." But do you really know what's happening? Or are you just interpreting the situation through your own insecurities? Maybe that person is distracted. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe it has nothing to do with you. When you observe your emotions without immediately reacting, you can understand them better. Every time a negative emotion overwhelms you, ask yourself, is this an automatic reaction? Or is there really something to worry about? That small space between the stimulus and your reaction is where freedom begins. Use reason to see reality as it is. If something makes you suffer, ask yourself this question: is this really a problem, or just my interpretation of the problem? Suppose someone criticizes you. Your first reaction might be, "They're attacking me, I'm not good enough, they want to humiliate me." But if you apply reason, you can ask yourself, what if they're just giving their opinion? What if this criticism can help me improve? Is it really worth feeling bad about this? When you change your perspective, your suffering diminishes. Most of our problems aren't real. They're just ways in which we interpret reality. The universe isn't against you, it just is. When you stop seeing everything as a personal attack, you start living with more peace and clarity. Accept what you cannot change. The universe follows its own rules. Things don't always go as you want. But resistance to the inevitable only increases your suffering. Learn to flow with reality instead of fighting against it. Imagine you planned a trip for months, and suddenly your flight gets canceled. Your first reaction is, "This is a disaster. My day is ruined. Nothing ever works out for me." But if you apply Spinoza's philosophy, you can ask yourself, can I do anything to change this situation? What new opportunities might arise from this? Is it worth getting angry about something that has already happened? When you accept the inevitable, you realize something powerful. You can't control the world, but you can control how you react to it. And that's where true freedom lies. The truth that few discover. Baruch Spinoza died without riches, without recognition, and without followers. He lived much of his life in isolation, writing, reflecting, and sharing his knowledge with the few people who understood him. He never sought fame, never wanted power, never tried to impose his ideas. And yet, centuries later, his philosophy continues to transform lives. What Spinoza discovered wasn't just an intellectual theory. It was a real tool for liberating ourselves from suffering, a way of seeing reality that completely changes the way we experience life. Because if you understand this truth, you realize something impactful. Suffering is not inevitable. It's a mental construction, the great decision. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in an illusion. They believe they must have more money to be happy. They believe they must find the perfect partner to feel complete. They believe that life should be fair. But now that you know the truth, you have two options. Ignore this knowledge and continue suffering over things you cannot control. Wake up and start living with more peace, clarity, and freedom. That's the choice Spinoza made. He chose not to lament what he had lost. He chose not to live in bitterness or nostalgia. He chose to understand reality and adapt to it. And that's the same choice that now lies before you. We cannot change the world, but we can change our mind. When Spinoza said that everything is determined, he didn't do it to discourage us, but to liberate us. If you accept that you don't have control over the world, but you do have control over how you interpret it, then you can transform your life experience. Think about someone who constantly complains about the past, who blames their parents, their environment, society for their problems, who believes their destiny was written by others and that they have no possibility of changing it. That person has become a slave to their own interpretation. Now think about someone who has lived through difficult experiences but decides to learn from them, who accepts what has happened and uses that knowledge to grow, who doesn't blame the world but understands that life is as it is and chooses the best possible response. That person has found freedom. That's the difference between living trapped in the illusion of suffering or awakening to the truth. Your next step. I want to ask you something. What is the biggest fear you've overcome in your life? Or if you haven't overcome it yet, what is the fear that's hardest for you to let go of? Leave your answer in the comments. If this content made you reflect and you want to learn more about philosophy, psychology, and personal growth, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. And remember, suffering doesn't come from reality. It comes from how you interpret it, and interpretation can be changed.